everyone. Welcome to the March 2026 Q&A on moving to France. My name is Allison Grant Lounes. I am the owner of the relocation agency Your Transformation, where we help people like you to get the right visa and do all of the right French admin to create a successful and sustainable life in France. So our goal is to help you to understand all of the things that you need to do to establish yourself in France, remembering, of course, that you've had all your life up until this point, or up until the point that you arrive in France, to get all of the admin done, everything from getting a birth certificate to getting a social security number, getting healthcare, setting up utilities. And you have to do all of those things in less than a year when you arrive in France and do it in a new country, in a new system, in a new language. And our goal is to support you through that process. We have a ton of questions to get through tonight, especially since there was no Q&A in February. Unfortunately, I was sick and had no voice for about a week. So I'm going to try to get through all of the questions from February and March, but we have a little more than an hour to do it, and we'll see what we can get done. I am the author of Foolproof French Visas, which is your guide to all of the visa types for living in France. And a lot of the questions that we're going to cover tonight are answered even more in depth in Foolproof French Visas, which helps you to understand what your visa options are, why you should pick one visa type over another, what your rights, obligations, and privileges are when you are on a particular visa type, and of course, which ones lead to long-term residence and naturalization, if that is your goal. So we are going to jump right into the questions. And I want to remind you too that if you have a lot of questions, if you want to go over your personal situation, your timeline, talk through your project, talk through your plan, your visa application project, especially if you are planning on starting a business, we do specialize in that. And you'll probably want to set up a consultation to go through your personal situation. The consultation fee is applied to as a credit to the cost of a package if you sign up for our services within 90 days. So it ends up being a free consultation if you do go on to work with us. And I'm going to stick the link to do that in the chat. And then we'll jump into the questions. I'm probably not going to have time to take additional questions from the chat today just because we've got so many in the submission. All right, so here we go. Tom, I am a recently retired professor of French and Spanish looking to move to France. Would an educational institution or other institution hire me to teach English or Spanish? Would they recognize my American degrees in France? If so, what would be the visas we should apply for? So the short answer is yes. The long answer is it really depends, because what you would be looking for is a position probably as a vacataire, which is a type of sort of adjunct professorship, which is not well paid like in the US. So probably in that scenario, Tom, what you're going to be looking for is applying for a profession libérale visa for self-employment, but you'll need to show additional income sources like tutoring or something like that, because normally with vacataire, you also have to be earning at least minimum wage in some other type of job, because basically vacataire, it's considered precarious. It can vary when they actually pay you after your class starts or ends. And so they want you to have other sources of income so that you're not relying solely on the vacataire income. So it can be an element of your visa application to be self-employed, but it can't be the sole source of your income. Since we want to stay long-term, when would we need to take the language and civics tests? Okay, so the language and civics tests are new requirements for now multi-year card holders, but also for 10-year resident card and citizenship. The language level has increased. So in any case, your first year is typically going to be on a 1-year visa. If you're a visitor, you're not applying for a multi-year card, a 10-year resident card. You're not going to be taking the civics test, and you're not going to have a language requirement until you become eligible for the 10-year resident card. And only then if you're under 65 at the time that you become eligible. So visitors, you typically don't have to worry about it, especially if you're going to be retired. Passport talent holders, you're also not subject to these requirements for your initial multi-year card. So you're not looking at the civics test or language test requirement until you've been in France for 5 years. That's going to be a B1 and a resident card civics test to get a 10-year residence card. For everyone else, so if you're the spouse of a French citizen, if you're on a salarié visa, if you are profession libérale, you are going to be subject to these requirements as soon as you otherwise become eligible for a multi-year card. So what this means is that if you're in profession libérale, you want to be earning at least French minimum wage, which is currently 1,823 euros per month, goes up a little bit every year in January. You want to be earning sufficient income. You'll need to have completed all of your OFI visits, your civics classes, and your medical visit. And then you'll need to have the civics exam for a multi-year card and an A2 level of French. So typically the DELF A2. So probably by the second year is when you're realistically going to be applying and need for a multi-year card and need to meet those requirements. Bryce, as a retiree, can I change my visa type upon renewal? Am I stuck with this visa type annually? So typically for a visitor visa, we advise you to not plan to change your visa type. It is very difficult. A lot of prefectures want to downright refuse to do it. If you're going to be retired, come on a visitor visa. If you're not going to be retired, that is not the visa type for you. And I see a lot of people online saying that, you should apply for a visitor visa because it's easiest and then change after you get here. That is terrible advice. It's going to land you in a lot of trouble and you're probably going to have to go home to reapply for a different visa. So don't do that. That's something, if you want to discuss other visa options, that would be something we would do in a consultation. Can I host virtual workshops for US or expats only since I stopped providing couples and individual counseling in the US during my current year in France, or can it work or it can work at time of renewal and change my visa type? If you are on a visitor visa, you have signed an agreement not to work in France, you are not allowed to work. It doesn't matter who is attending these workshops, whether they are in France or in the US or on the moon, it doesn't matter where the money goes. You're residing in France, you've made a declaration that you are not working, you cannot work. You could provide a workshop for free if you're doing it for an association. Like I can think of, there are different associations like the American Women's Groups, different nonprofit associations, Cancer Support France, a lot of things like that that serve the English speaking community in France. And you would be able to do a workshop for free or have the association benefit from selling access to the workshop, but you can't be running a business activity and earning money from a workshop in France while you're on a visitor visa. Kelly, my question is regarding the income requirements for the long stay visitor or the student visa. Okay, so for a visitor visa, you're looking at net SMIC, which right now is 1,443 euros per month. So I always round up to 1,500 euros per month times 12. That's about 18,000 euros. That's what they want to see for a visitor visa or for now a profession libérale visa if you're going to be self-employed. For a student visa, they're looking at 615 euros per month. That hasn't gone up in several years, so I would expect it to go up sometime soon, but there's no particular reason, there's no particular timeline for when we might expect that. 615 euros per month times the number of months that you'll be in your program. And of course, like they want to see that your program's paid for, that your expenses are paid for, because depending on where you're studying, 615 euros per month is not going to cut it in terms of your expenses. I work as a freelancer and my income is around $1,500 per month. So already, if you work as a freelancer, you're excluding yourself from a student visa because you cannot be a self-employed person on a student visa. Would income from Social Security disability be considered as income for visa processing purposes? So the answer is not really, unless you're on a visitor visa. If you're on a visitor visa, any type of passive income, whether it's disability or pension or interest or rental income, any of that would qualify and be totally fine. Also, if you're on a student visa, they would take that financial support into consideration for a student visa. However, when you are freelancing, when you're self-employed and looking at a profession libérale visa, they want to see 18,000 euros approximately in cash in a French bank now when you request your approval from DRITS, the Direction Interrégionale de l'Économie, de l'Emploi, du Travail et des Solidarités. That's the organization that oversees the approval of business plans for profession libérale and the approval of work contracts and work authorization for salarié employees. They are looking at cash in a French bank for your visa to be issued. And when you go to renew your visa, the prefecture wants to see income specifically from the business activity that you have said you were going to do in France in your business plan. So they're not taking into account at renewal, they're not taking into account any other type of income aside from the income specifically from your business. They may be slightly more lenient in the first year or two, but there have been people who have been rejected for renewals and who, especially starting at the end of year two, because they weren't making money from the business, even if they had other resources. So if you're self-employed, if you're starting a business, you need to do the business that you said you were going to do, and you need to make at least minimum wage doing it if you would like to renew your visa. Based on my financial situation, what other visa would I qualify for either in France or in any other country in Europe? So I can't speak to any country other than France. I would say that if you're a freelancer, your best bet is to apply for the self-employment visa, but we need to get your income up to more than French minimum wage, which is again 1,823 euros per month. We need to show a business plan and we need to show you'll need to increase your savings before you can apply, and you'll need to show that you have clients and business activity in France. George, with all the legislative changes, what are the financial impacts to expats? How should we plan? Okay, that's a really broad question that I'm not going to attempt. There's one main thing that we're going to be looking out for that we don't have any details on yet, and that is the fact that the new budget has passed with a fee for accessing the French healthcare system. So when you are residing in France for more than 3 months, you are eligible to register for the French healthcare system through PUMA. It is universal, and so the expectation is that you are living in France, you are participating in the system. If you're on a visitor visa, you do have to have temporary health coverage until you are covered in the French system. Payment of the PUMA contribution is based on, excludes pensions, so a lot of American retirees are exempt, and therefore, in the new budget, there is going to be an assessment of a contribution. It will be decided by decree. We do not have a decree yet, so I cannot tell you what the amount will be. Can I open a bank account first? I assume by first you mean, can I open a bank account before moving to France? The short answer is no. The long answer is if you're starting a business or purchasing a property, there are some circumstances in which you can open a bank account as part or before the relocation actually happens. But you need some sort of economic tie to France in order to open a bank account. Yumi, I know that I need to have health insurance for applying for a French visa for VLSTS, VLST, and VLS requirements. I don't know which is the most suitable yet. Okay. So first I want to clarify, VLS means Visa de Long Séjour. That is any visa over 90 days. VLST is a Visa de Long Séjour temporaire. That is a visa from 3 months to 12 months that is temporary and not renewable. VLSTS is Visa de Long Séjour valant titre de séjour, and that actually refers to about a dozen different visa types, and not all of them have the same requirement, and not all of them require proof of insurance at the visa appointment stage. Should you have temporary insurance until you get on the French healthcare system? Absolutely. Do they look at it for every single visa application type? Not always. So it's important to know which visa type you mean, to know about the requirement, and what documents are going to be required. And I don't have enough from your question to know. I'm going to go ahead and assume that you mean a visitor visa because usually when people say VLSTS, they actually mean a visitor visa. If I have health insurance coverage in the US and this insurance will also cover for internationally, can I use this without purchasing other insurance for applying for the French visa? Probably not. So in order to qualify for the visa insurance requirement, it needs to be not a travel policy. It needs to be 30,000 euros of coverage, valid in the entire Schengen space for 1 full year, zero deductible, and include repatriation. You will need to have a copy of the policy and a certificate of your coverage for the next full year, showing that it meets the requirements. I have very occasionally seen them accept TRICARE, which is quite complete, but I've also seen TRICARE be rejected. So 99.99% of cases, you're going to need to purchase a policy. However, I can almost guarantee you that whatever policy we recommend for you is going to be a lot less expensive than whatever you're paying for your US healthcare. Born in France and live in the US and have dual citizenship. I assume you mean dual citizenship with France. So therefore, no, you do not need a visa to move to France. How long before moving back to France should I set up a bank account? You don't need to set up one before you go. I would say you can return to France, find long-term housing, and use your proof of housing to set up a bank account when you arrive. And we can assist. We work with Currencies Direct. If you need to transfer money back to pay some bills, to purchase an apartment or a house or anything like that, we can recommend some solutions for doing that. And you don't need to have a French bank account before you do that. Stephanie. I'm a 63-year-old US citizen currently living in the Netherlands since 2022 on a visa that requires me to run a business. I'd like to close the business and retire to France. Can I submit a long stay visa application in the Netherlands, or do I have to return to the US to apply from it there? So you can apply for a French visa in any country where you have citizenship or long-term residence. So if you currently have a valid residence permit for the Netherlands, you can absolutely apply for a visa from there to move to France. I want to say that the Netherlands, that Benelux, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg are all covered by one consulate, and I believe that might be in Belgium. So you may have to travel to Brussels, but I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. But yes, you can apply from Europe and not go back to the US. Haley, I work as a sales associate in a shop with a 35-hour CDI contract on a working holiday visa. My company has expressed the possibility of assisting me in applying for a working visa. I want to reduce my hours to 28 hours a week. Will that hinder my chances of attaining a working visa if I'm not working full time? Okay, so unfortunately, I don't think this is a plan that's really going to work. After a working holiday visa, you will need to leave and go to your home country and reapply for a visa. In order to apply for a salaried work visa with a CDI, you will need to be working full time, earning at least French minimum wage. So again, over 1,823 euros per month gross. And you will also need to have you'll have to have work authorization, which basically is going to require that the French company post the job, collect other applications, and they will have to prove to the DREETS, again, the same agency that controls foreign work contracts, they'll have to prove to them that they tried to hire somebody local who already had work rights and were not able to do so. And only then, after a month of the job being posted and then 3 months of waiting for DREETS to approve it, only then would you be able to apply for a salaried work visa. Typically, oh, I didn't move enough and the lights went off. Typically, that's not going to be possible with a sales associate position at what I assume is minimum wage or slightly higher. So I'm sorry. To meet. Can you tell me about the advantages of the visa application if my wife is French? I think they call it the family visa. So that would be a vie privée et familiale visa. It is for 1 year. In order to get that visa, you need to have a livret de famille and a French transcription of your marriage certificate if you were married outside of France, or a French marriage certificate if you're married inside of France. It will be a 12-month visa. You will have to do all of the OFI obligations, the medical visit, the 4 civics classes, etc. At the end of your first year, you are eligible to apply for a multi-year card for 2 years. But in order to do so, you would need to show an A2 level of French, and you would need to show that you have passed the civics test for a multi-year card. Otherwise, if you haven't done all of those requirements, you could renew a 1-year card while you wait to complete them. And I expect that for most people, it's going to take 2 years in order to do all of the things that you need to do now. If my French wife, with 42 years working in the UK, can have her state pension removed as she returns to France, I don't see why she would have her pension removed, but that's a question for a financial advisor. I'm not going to get into the political part that I did not read. But there's no reason to assume that that anything would happen to it. However, what I will say is that UK pensions, depending on whether they're state pension or state government pension or private pension or company pensions or all of the different types, I'm not really that familiar with them like I am the US pension types. But they are treated differently under the tax treaty than US pensions. And so you do want to make sure you're talking to a financial advisor and tax advisor who are competent in UK, France tax. Ivana, how do I prove my income to the embassy and can I keep my remote job? So you can keep your remote job if you get a visa that enables you to work and to invoice the company or have it set you up as an employee or something. So There are a few legitimate ways. There's a whole chapter on working remotely, what's possible and what's not, in foolproof French visas. So it's going to depend on your visa type and how you're setting up to make sure that your social charges and income taxes are paid in France first. So I would say that's the first place you want to look to understand that question. You cannot work remotely on a visitor visa. It is not possible. How do I prove my income to the embassy? So you're going to need to show bank statements. If you're going to be self-employed or working, it would be a work contract, contracts with your clients, contracts with future clients, plus cash in the bank. How long is the application process? It depends on what visa type, and I don't have enough information from your question to answer. I'd like to hear more about the best ways to find a rental apartment or home. So we work with a few rental search agents. Depending on your area and budget, we can recommend some people to work with. It's best to be working with someone for a few reasons. If you're a foreigner who is arriving in France and you don't have any kind of French dossier, you don't have French income documents, French tax declarations, guarantor, etc., you're a huge risk to a French landlord, and so they don't want to rent to you. So a couple things you can do to reduce that risk for them. One is to get some kind of lease guarantee service where you pay for an insurance policy whereby if you don't pay your rent, like they still pay the landlord and then they go after you for your assets, which might be in another country. That's one thing that contributes to enabling you to rent in France. And then the other thing is, of course, working with somebody who can advocate for you and help your file to get approved by a landlord or an agency because there's a lot of competition, especially in the cities. If they have 30 or 40 applications for an apartment and they have better files than you and all of your income is foreign, there's not necessarily a good incentive to rent to you. Brandy, can you please clarify in regards to the micro entrepreneur visa how you can begin marketing your services before arriving in France and when you first arrive but are still waiting for the business and visa approval? So you don't get approval for the business or the visa until you have like potential clients and future clients in France and have done the business plan and all kinds of stuff. So we hosted a webinar a couple weeks ago on LinkedIn with Tell Me Panda, and we did a LinkedIn webinar to understand how to network and market with people in French or in France. So typically what we're doing when we're helping clients to develop their business idea is we are helping you to look at what are the products and services that you're going to be offering. How are we going to package that up into a nice business plan that is going to make sense to the bureaucrats who are reading your application? And then we're helping you to develop like what are the ways that you can market and connect with potential clients in France before we go and get approval from the DREETs, before you go and apply for the visa, because you'll need to have those letters of support, whether it's from future clients, whether it's from people who are going to introduce you to other potential clients, networking opportunities, things like that. We want to show that you're going to be able to hit the ground running. And not all of our clients obviously start getting clients and making Smeek immediately. But what we want you to have at least is an action plan of things that you're going to be able to do so that you're able to find those clients and start making money and understand the types of people that you're going to be looking to connect with when you arrive in France. But yeah, I mean, it's you do have to really hustle when you get here. Like I said, they can be, especially if you have other resources, they can be more lenient at the end of their first year. We have lots of clients who are not up to earning Smeek every month. It used to be theoretically possible to get a 4-year card at the end of your first year if you were making Smeek. But now with these new requirements for completing the civics test and the language test and all of those things, it's really not possible to do in 1 year anymore. It's kind of unrealistic. So you need to consider that you have about 2 years. But yeah, you need to have a really good plan. Like you don't want to get close to your visa's expiration and not be earning any money. That's not great. So I would say that if you're unsure, then that would be a reason to work with us and to have us help you to develop not only the business plan, but also work with you on developing the connections and the networking and the things that you're going to have to do when you arrive in France to make sure that you're not crashing and burning and not getting the business started as soon as you get here. Can court-ordered child support be used as passive as the passive income minimum requirement. What about passive income from an online course with no active work being done through an American company? Child support could be passive income if you're talking about the visitor visa, but running a company and having business income is not passive income. So it doesn't matter, like, it doesn't, like, that's self-employment. You do not have to be a specific age for a visitor visa. You just have to meet the passive income requirement. However, we have noticed a significant uptick. Like they are looking now for people who are working remotely and running businesses on visitor visas. We have had many clients who, and we don't work, I do not do renewals for people who are working remotely on visitor visas if they come to me. We don't set up our clients to do that. But for all of our clients almost who are under 67, so under retirement age, who are living off of their resources, we have had a lot of inquiries for additional documents, translated tax declarations. They want to see bank statements. Like they want to see where your money's coming from because they're looking out for people who are not retirement age, who are working and not being truthful about it. You want to be really careful and make sure that if you're applying for and renewing a visitor visa, that you are actually not working and that you're living off your assets and that you're going to be able to prove that at renewal time. MC, why is there a lack of information for expats wanting to relocate to Rennes and Brittany in general? I wouldn't necessarily say that there is. We have quite a few clients who are in Rennes or Brittany, or not in Rennes specifically, but in Brittany. I haven't been able to locate a Franco-American company that helps people look for long-term furnished rentals apartments that has an office or at least an agent in that region. A lot of this work now is done remotely. So I almost never make recommendations based on physical location. We have a lot of buyer's agents who will look for properties for people who will travel anywhere in France or who have like a really wide geographical area. The two main companies that we work with for apartment searches work pretty much throughout France and work almost all remotely. So I think you just need to not focus on them being in a specific geographical area and focus more on the skills that they're providing to support your application. Must every single document submitted with the visa application be accompanied by a translation and an apostille? No, I don't know who is spreading that rumor, but you don't need any translations or apostilles at the visa application. There are a couple of translations that you will need during your first year, but nothing that you need to get before you arrive in France. Apostille, I would say you need it if you're going to get married or when you apply for citizenship. In most cases, you're not going to need an apostille. We've had one client, I think, be asked for an apostille in about 5 years for her healthcare registration. Jerry, the French website Dossier Facile looks like a good option for sharing a rental dossier with prospective landlords. The website asks for proof of accommodations. If a person is staying in an Airbnb, what would be provided to show this? Probably just your reservation from Airbnb. It looks like someone still needs to guarantee the rent payment. Yes, Dossier Facile does not replace Garant Me, Visial, Smart Garant, any of those. So you would still need a guarantee service. Haley, I currently hold a working holiday visa which will expire in a few months. Will there be an issue if I leave France before the expiration date and re-enter shortly after as a tourist? No. You may, for the purposes of the airline or border control, you may need to show like onward travel within 90 days. And you'll probably get fingerprinted based on the entry-exit system that's now in place. Erin, can you talk more about the regroupement familial sur place process where we submit the application, see how long it takes? I'm here on a profession libérale visa thanks to your business incubator and book. My husband and two kids came with me on visitor visa. He tried to change status to vie privée familiale for regroupement familial after 2 years, but was rejected. He's going to try again this third year. My earnings are above SMIC, we're integrated here, etc. So in order to start the regroupement familial, you need to go through OFI, not through the préfecture. So you'll have to look up your local OFI office and see what their procedure is for starting the application. They have to approve it before the préfecture can. And unfortunately, it's one of those things where it takes as long as it takes. So I can't really give you a timeline. Patricia, have your clients from the US been able to keep their US bank accounts if they don't have a US address? Our specific banks they recommend. Thank you so much. Okay, so it depends on the bank. Some people have had no issues, some people have. What I recommend is I'm a member of the State Department Federal Credit Union, which is not affiliated with the actual State Department. In order to join the SDFCU, you need to be a member of one of the associations that is a member of it. I'm also on the board of ARO, the Association of Americans Resident Overseas, and they membership with ARO enables you to get an account with the SDFCU. I have had no issues with a foreign address, and in fact, you can even have two addresses. I do have a US address through my family that I use to be able to use like Zelle, but I've had no issues with the French address being the primary address. Can have the app on my phone. I can get text alerts to my French number. They send mail to me in France. It's not an issue. So it's sdfcu.org. And in order to join, you have to be a member of one of the associations. So I would recommend joining ARO, which is the Association of Americans Resident Overseas. T, if I arrive before the visa start date, can I arrive as a regular tourist, leave for the UK, and return on the visa on its effective date? Yes. And in fact, we have had, if you're able to enter France without a visa, like just on a passport, then it's not typically an issue if you enter France before your visa start date. And we've had people, their visa starts on March 13th, they arrive on March 9th, and then the only challenge that we have to be aware of is like when you go to validate your visa, you can't say that you arrive March 9th, you have to say that you arrive March 13th. But people have not had a problem getting in, and you don't even have to leave and come back. You just have to put your visa start date as your arrival date. If I'm not able to arrive on the visa start date, how much time do I have to arrive late? So it's really important that you try to coincide your visa start date with your actual arrival date. It's not a hard and fast rule, like there's not going to be a penalty if you don't. However, there's so much to do in your first year in France that you really don't want to lose any time by having your visa start before you actually get here. To give you an example of the most important things that you need to do, obviously within the first 90 days, you need to validate your visa. That time frame is reduced to 60 days if you are requesting a carte de séjour because you're a talent passport holder. And in order to do either of those things, typically you need to find a long-term address where you can get mail. So if you're looking for a rental and you need to find a lease and move in and get utility bills and all of that stuff set up, that can take a while. So typically, what we advise is staying in an Airbnb for the first 6-ish weeks, 4 to 6 in some areas, 6 to 8 in the areas where housing is really tight, and as quickly as possible, trying to find that place to live because you need those bills and all of that admin set up before you can validate your visa to a long-term address, register for the French healthcare system, exchange your license, all the stuff that has to be done really quickly after you arrive so that it will get done during your first year. So, yeah, if it's a week or two, fine. If it's a couple weeks, you have to really be careful. And similarly, if you wait more than 90 days, like your visa is technically void and you won't be able to validate it anymore. You have to go back and reapply for a different visa. Shannon, can you work remotely on a long stay visitor visa? No, not at all. Can you bring dependents and can the spouse also work remotely? Nobody can work remotely on a visitor visa. You can bring dependents on their own visitor visas, but everybody will have to meet the qualifications for the visitor visa. Again, this is not a good option if you say spouse and kids, so I assume they're minors, which leads me to believe that you are not close to retirement age. I would very strongly discourage you from the visitor visa plan, mostly because, a lot of times when they're looking at these visa applications, what they're seeing is if you're not close to retirement age, they're not going to expect that you are actually not going to work for 5 years or longer in order to establish residence in France and take that huge gap in your work experience and then start working again. So they are much more likely to give you a temporary visa, which does not count towards any type of long-term residency and really causes problems because you can't get any of your admin set up during your first year on that visa type. How long does it take to get a French visa? It depends. So for our visitor clients, we typically advise starting to work with us 2 to 3 months before you want to arrive in France, 3-ish. By the time we do all of your onboarding, we have a lot of training materials on things to do before you leave, some of which you might not have thought of. So we do like to have people start working with us with enough time to adequately prepare everything, be able to give you all of our referrals and our information so that you're not rushed. But I mean, visitor visas are not super complicated to prepare, so it's really just more about having that overall plan in place and understanding all of the things that we're going to be doing for you when you arrive in France. For if you're starting a business or being self-employed, typically we're looking at 6 to 8 months. That's the current timeline right now because we need to do the business plan and then there's other admin to do. You'll need to get approval of the business plan and all of those things take as long as they take. So typically want to start working with 6 to 8 months for business visas before you want to arrive in France. 3-ish months for a visitor, sabbatical, family visa is fine. And then typically we're working with people until about 6 or 7 months after they arrive in France. And then, of course, we're sending out reminders for renewals and things like that. And you can continue working with us if you want us to continue handling renewals and things like that. In terms of turnaround time from submitting the visa to getting a response, usually that's less than a week. But really, the preparation time depends on the visa type. What is the difference between residency and being a citizen? Voting. Voting and freedom of movement. If you're a resident, you're a resident of that particular EU country, and you cannot necessarily vote. There are some countries, I believe, that allow permanent residents who are not citizens to vote in local but not national elections. But those are the two main differences. And then, of course, if you're a citizen, you have a freedom of movement where you can go and live in Germany or Italy or any other EU country without getting a visa as long as you're exercising your EU treaty right to free movement. Mimi, is getting a green card the same thing as becoming a resident? Green card is a US thing, it's not a French thing. But no, getting a resident card is not the same thing as like being a resident, especially for tax purposes. How soon before you can register for health insurance? So if you're starting a business, if you're being self-employed, you can register pretty quickly as soon as your business is registered. With the understanding that filing the registration and being eligible for the system is not the same thing as having the card that will enable you to get reimbursed quickly. You'll still have a few months at least of having to pay out of pocket if anything happens, and then being able to get reimbursed based on when you were approved in the French system. If you're not working, you can start the registration process after 3 months in France. Again, this requires that you have a long-term address, you have a place where you can get mail in your name, you have utility bills showing consumption, you have proof that you're actually living there. They're really looking very closely right now at like what is the evidence that this person is actually residing at and consuming utilities at the place that they say they're living. Okay, this is a new one. Stephanie, can I submit a visa application with a document showing my Social Security benefits more than meet my income requirement, even if I don't plan to collect Social Security until I move to France? Well, if you're showing that you're going to be receiving a pension in the future, but you're not currently receiving it now, you're going to need to show cash savings of more than 12 times net SMEEK. So again, around 18,000 euros. Carla, how much money do I have to show my bank account for a retirement visa? So again, that's the visitor visa. That's 12 times net SMEEK, around 18,000 euros. Can it be in a Roth IRA, in an IRA account? So for the visitor visa, they want to see cash. If you're receiving distributions from an IRA or a 401k regularly and you have statements to that effect, then you can use the proof of the distributions as proof of income. But typically, they still want to see a significant chunk in cash because investments can lose value. You might not take distributions from your IRA, and they want to see that you actually have money that you can access and live off of immediately. If you have the minimum of 18,000 euros, if you have that in a bank account in cash, but then you have an investment account showing additional funds, like great. If I move to France before they change the rules for getting French healthcare, do you think I would be grandfathered in? No. So they're not changing the rules for getting French healthcare because the process is still going to be the same in terms of after you reside in France for at least 3 months, you are eligible to apply to register to be on the system, and your expenses will be reimbursed in line with every other person who resides in France. There's no national preference or any type of discrimination for how registration for the healthcare system is handled. What is going to change is now the people who are benefiting from the system who are not working are going to be assessed a fee in a different way. But I would expect that will apply to everyone who is not working, who is on a visitor visa. And the way that they have written the decree is not just visitor visa, but more broadly anyone who is residing in France without contributing into the system. And I will expect that to apply to everyone across the board once it is determined how that fee will be calculated and what the amount will be. Joni, where can we stay when we first arrive? So typically, we recommend getting some type of temporary rental, 4 to 6 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks if you're in a like really popular city like Nice or Paris. And then you need to use that time to find a long-term lease with bills in your name where you're going to have utility bills and be able to get mail and all of that. Lauren, I'm a wedding photographer looking to move to France. My income fluctuates from month to month and based on the season. Is this a problem for applying for a visa? No, they're looking at averages or annual income, not only monthly income. So if you're a wedding photographer, I would expect that the vast majority of your income is going to be like mid-April through mid-October, and that you might not earn anything in November or February, and that's totally fine. If you're making more than Smeek during the summer season, it's totally okay to have a seasonal activity as long as the overall income exceeds what they're looking for. Do you recommend setting up an LLC or business structure before applying for the Profession Libérale visa? No. The visa requires the business to be registered in France as a micro entrepreneur activity. There are some reasons that you might want to have an LLC, especially like if you're ever traveling back to the US to do weddings on site in the US and you have travel expenses and you have work that is physically being done in the US that you can run through the LLC. Like that and a few other reasons for opening an LLC, but depending on what your income level is, it may or may not make sense to do that. So that would be something I would want to talk through more in a consultation. Okay, Carla, for the retirement visa. So a retirement visa, I want to clarify that a retirement visa is a specific type of visa for somebody who has lived and worked in France and receives a French pension. And the retirement visa does not enable them to live in France long term. It allows them to spend up to 1 year at a time in France without establishing residence. So that's what a retirement visa is. I actually don't cover it in foolproof French visas because it's not really something that the Anglophone readers or the Anglophone people that we work with are going to be familiar with. So if you're looking at retiring to France, you're looking at a long-term visitor visa. Do I have to open a bank account and have my pension deposited in a French bank, or can I just transfer money into the account from an American bank account? You do not have to have your pension transferred or deposited directly into a French bank. You do not need to open a French bank account before you arrive in France. However, if you're getting US Social Security, the US government gets the best exchange rate. So it can be favorable to you to have Social Security deposited directly into a French bank. You do, however, it is extremely important that you open a French bank as soon as you can after arriving in France, and that you either maintain a high cash balance of around 18,000 euros, or that you are regularly depositing, and I mean monthly, at least 1,500 euros per month. Because the French government, when they're looking at renewing your visa, they're looking at proof of your integration, proof that you're actually residing in France, and proof that you have the financial resources available to you in France. If you are trying to use US bank statements, they are now asking for translations. So if you have multiple months of 4, 5, 10-page bank statements that you need to get translated, that's very expensive. So we'd like to avoid that. And they're also, yeah, they're being super annoying on the financial proof right now. And yeah, I mean, if you are trying to like use an American credit card or debit card and you're not actually using your French bank account, it's going to look to the French government like you don't live here. So, not a great idea. If I have more than enough monthly income for the minimum requirement for the visitor visa, do I need to have a required amount in savings also? I mean, they want to see that you have money, right? They don't want to see that you're transferring in 1,500 euros every month, immediately spending all of it, and that you have no savings. So you need to consider maintaining a balance and transferring money in regularly and not spending it down. Genevieve, have you ever worked with anyone securing the talent passport qualified employee visa? Yes. So Talent passport qualified employee is when you have graduated with a French master's degree or some equivalent degrees. You have a salary of at least 39,582 euros gross annual salary, and the employer is able to more easily sponsor you because of your French degree. If your degree is not French, you don't qualify for that. You need to do a carte bleue européenne or a highly qualified salaried employee visa, and for that you need a salary of 59,373 euros. These salaries might not seem super high to you, but I always like to remind people that they put you 59,373 euros puts you in like the 98th to 99th percentile of French salaried employees. Salaries are low in France. People do not earn a very high salary. It is very expensive to employ someone with a salary at that level. And so it's quite difficult and rare to get a job at that salary level. Okay, Jenny, can you add secondary activities to a profession libérale visa at any time after arrival in France? So you don't add secondary activities to your visa, you add them to your business registration through INP. And you can do that either at the time of registration when you register the business, or you can do it at a later time. But I mean, you do want to make sure that the activities are related, and you want to make sure that when you go to renew your visa, that you're showing at least minimum wage and that you still looks like you know what you're doing from a business perspective. What is the process to change the main business activity on a profession libérale visa if a better opportunity presents itself after moving to France? So, I mean, ideally, you want the opportunities that you're applying for in France to be similar to the ones that you put in your business plan, or like substantially similar. They don't have to be exactly the same, but yeah, that's done on your business registration. Now, are they going back to look at your business plan and were you doing, oh, I said I was going to design websites, but then I was also doing IT consulting? Like, no, they don't care at that level. But if it's, oh yeah, I said I was going to be a yoga teacher and now I'm doing dog training and freelancing for the circus, I mean, then that's a pretty big change. Harriet, if I have a remote UK job that is salaried, can I come on a visitor visa? No. Will I be denied on the pure basis of having a job? Very likely. If by some miracle they do approve you for a visa, you're going to get in trouble tax-wise because you won't be paying the proper social and income taxes in France first. If you're denied a visa, when can you reapply? As soon as you understand what went wrong with your application and how and what you need to do in order to improve and resubmit it, you can reapply. There's no particular waiting period. There's a difference between reapplying and appealing. When you appeal, you have to demonstrate that they made an incorrect decision on the basis of the information that they had at the time of the application, meaning like you did everything right, you provided all the correct information, and like they did not make a decision in line with what the actual guidelines are. That's quite hard to do, and most appeals are rejected. So I don't normally advise appealing. I advise like understanding what went wrong with the initial visa application and what needs to be fixed and submitting a reapplication as soon as possible. Saffron. Let's say I found a furnished rental and want to live there for 1 year before buying. If I have my belongings shipped from the US after I buy in year two, what are the tax implications? You'll pay duties. You get duty free for 1 year. So there are two solutions to this. One solution is you go on a temporary non-renewable visa, you leave at the end of your first year, but even that might not work because in some cases they will ask you that you were residing in the US for at least 12 months before you apply for a certificate of change of residence. So scratch what I just said. You need to get your belongings to France within the first year. Even if you put them in storage in France, that's going to be less expensive than putting them in storage in the US or in your home country and paying duties on it. If I started the visa process by April 1, approximately how long would it take before my visa is approved? So it depends on what visa type. And again, like, I don't know if you mean starting the visa application process, like starting to prepare the application, or if you mean like I'm having my visa appointment on April 1st, because to me, we're March 9th, it would be difficult to prepare and complete a good, complete visa application and schedule an appointment now before April 1st. So I would say, depending on the visa type, again, 6 to 8 months for a business visa. It can be done faster, but you want cushion in there so you're not super stressed out. Three-ish months for a visitor visa or a family visa. And then depending on the work visa type, again, it depends on How long does it take you to find a job? How long does it take for them to prepare the contract? I'm hiring somebody. I met her at the beginning of February and she's starting at the end of March because I need to prepare the contract and order her materials and get her signed up for the mutual and get all the pay stuff transferred to our accounting. So it's a whole process and I don't have to sponsor her. So if you throw in visa sponsorship and getting work authorization and all of that into it, you're adding a couple months, even if you don't have to get approval from the treats. I'm trying to be really clear on the working remotely question, but they keep coming up. You cannot work remotely on a visitor visa. There are visas for working, there are visas for being a visitor and not working. They're different things. There's no working on a visitor visa. It doesn't matter if you're working remotely or not. The answer is no. Kendra, I'm currently a caregiver for my mother, and I'm worried that France will continue to tighten the restrictions on a visitor visa until I'm able to make a move when she passes away. So I'm considering doing a golden visa with another country that does not require I live in that country full time in order to gain a foothold in Europe. Though my plan is to eventually move to France. Will having residency in another EU country hurt or perhaps help me in gaining eventual French residency carte de séjour? Okay, so first of all, I don't think there's any real danger of France restricting visitor visa requirements any further. I think, especially when we have our clients working with us, we're advising on doing all of these things, like making sure the bank account is set up, making sure you have bills in your names, like all of the admin things that make the renewal process smoother, because that's where people get stuck. A lot of times they'll come with the visa on their own and then they don't do anything else that they're supposed to do in the first year. Like they don't exchange their driver's license, they don't register for the French healthcare system. They think, oh, I can do that at the end of the year before I renew my visa. No, you need to start it like month 3 at the latest. So that's where people get tripped up, not that the requirements themselves are getting harder. But I mean, in terms of whether having a residence permit from another EU country will help you, two possibilities. One is that it's a temporary residence permit for less than 5 years, in which case you can apply for a French visa from that country, but you still have to go through the same process as everyone else. The other possibility is if you actually have a long-term resident card for one of those countries, you can apply for a visa or a carte de séjour directly in France if you meet the qualifications, but it doesn't change what the requirements are. And it's a very long process for getting approved. When you're applying for a carte de séjour and you have no visa, it's really not, it's not an ideal situation. So I would say that it's not a great idea. The other thing too to keep in mind is that a lot of countries are restricting or ending their golden visa programs because they're not really they're not really sustainable. Marcia, is it possible to stay in France if you have a student visa while you're applying for a different type, like auto entrepreneur or long stay visitor? Yes. So when you're changing status and that particular change of status is allowed, then you can stay in France. For certain types of changes of status, let's say you're going from you want your working holiday visa and then you want to get a regular salaried work visa, you would need to go back because working holiday does not allow you to renew or extend in France at all. So it depends on what change of status you're making. Does your stay on a student visa contribute to years towards citizenship? Kind of depends on what type of program you're doing. Like technically it counts, but you also have to show a certain number of years of financial stability. So depending on how long you were in France, what type of program you were doing, whether or not you had any professional activity, etc., what your overall financial situation is, it can count, but not necessarily. Okay, there's a question about the income laws for applying for naturalization. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's quite long, but I do want to explain that requirement. So my position has always been that one of the main criteria for requesting French naturalization is that you are economically integrated. They take into account your professional experience. They want you to have multiple years of working in France, paying French taxes, earning at least minimum wage. So to me, it is not really a new thing that it is now difficult to naturalize when you have foreign sources of income, when you're retired, etc. That's something that I have covered in every edition of Foolproof French Visas since the first one came out in 2019. It used to be there was a little bit more discretion, and so some retirees would get naturalized, but there has not been significant discretion in the income requirement. They want to see that you are making at least minimum wage, that you're paying French taxes, that if you came here to do a business or work, then you're continuing to do that thing and you're reasonably able to pay your bills with it. You don't have to be a millionaire from it, but yeah, Lori, I heard you mention on one of the Q&As that if you own a French house, you could possibly open a French bank account from the US. Is that still possible? Yeah, if you own property in France, then typically a French bank will open a bank account for you. Could we, in theory, also shop for an apartment to rent from the US too, or is that something? Oh, I see. Okay. There's also theoretically nothing preventing you from having a long-term lease before you arrive in France. It's not a requirement. I don't usually recommend it just because the logistics of signing a 12-month lease when you are not physically on the ground in France is quite difficult. But I mean, some people do it, and we have clients who've done that. All right, we are actually almost to the end, so I think I'm going to get through everything. Bryn, I am waiting on French citizenship documents, which I expect will arrive by April. We are moving to France June 14th. At what point would you recommend looking to visa options if the documents haven't yet arrived? Second, I own my own business all online and plan to continue work in France. I believe I could apply for an auto entrepreneur visa based on my current business, or would it make more sense to get a visitor visa? So it really depends on what the timeline is. I mean, I have clients who have done that, applied for either auto entrepreneur or visitor visa because they were waiting for an EU citizenship to come through, whether France or Ireland in one case, Italy in another. So they did the visa for their business or for whatever their project was. And then, of course, once they got the EU passport, they didn't have to renew it. I will say that even if your citizenship does come through, you still have to make sure that your business is registered properly in France after you arrive. Patricia, for the visa talent artistique, so the passport talent profession artistique is this visa type. Do I need to open a non-resident bank account in France before my TLS appointment? No. Okay, and we covered the US bank account question earlier. Richard, if I apply for a long stay visitor visa for Paris, where I will be arriving and staying at first, will it be possible to move to another French city after 3 or 6 months? Yes, with a caveat, a couple of caveats. You can absolutely move cities. It's not a great idea. You especially want to avoid moving around the renewal time of your visa. Typically, what we advise is waiting until you find a long-term address with bills in your name where you can get mail before we do any French admin. So, our strong recommendation preference is to validate your visa to your long-term address where you will be staying long-term. And if you do that within a couple weeks of arriving and then 3 months later you move, that's going to be a big problem. But you can always get mail forwarding. The question is going to be, at what point do you try to change your address online? You will be invited for your OFI visit in the original city where you validated your visa. So if you validate with a Paris address and then you move to Nice, you're going to have to come back to either you're going to have to come back to Paris to go to OFI, or you're going to have to tell them that they need to move your file down to Nice and it's going to take probably a year before you get called in again. So don't do that. So it really depends. It's not my advice to move quickly. It's my advice to spend time looking for the place that you want to live within the first 2 months, validate your visa to a long-term address, and then move later. Okay, TM. Can you speak about the possibility of us retirees fluent in French studying in France under a student visa which allows 20 hours a week of work? What can they study for how long? So the thing is that a student visa is still considered a temporary visa status. So you can't apply for naturalization under a student visa. You need to switch to something else. And then after you switch away for something else, you'll need to be in a full-time work contract for 2 to 3 years before, or self-employed earning at least minimum wage for 2 to 3 years before you can apply for naturalization. So even if there's this thing that floats around the internet, which I talk about in the book, oh, if you earn a master's degree after 2 years of study, you're eligible for French naturalization. You can naturalize it in 2 years if you do a master's. But really, you do the 2 year master's. After that, you get a year to look for a job. Now, if you're 24 and just out of school and you're up against other 24-year-old kids who are entry level looking at entry level positions, then you have a pretty good chance of getting and you speak fluent French. You have a pretty good chance of getting a job and working in it for a couple of years and being able to naturalize, but they still now want to see those 2 to 3 years of working minimum wage, excuse me, earning at least minimum wage before you get approved. So that 2 year thing is a lie to begin with, or it's a gross misrepresentation of how it actually works on the ground. But let's say you're doing some other type of program, you're not earning a master's degree. You can work for 20 hours a week, but first of all, are they going to give you a student visa? Because if you're retired and you don't have any academic or professional motivation for continuing your studies, it's very likely that Campus France and the consulate will decide that you're studying for your own private purposes. You're not eligible for a student visa because you're not really a student. But let's say you get the student visa, you do it for a couple of years, then what? You still have to find work and change your visa status and do something. And if you're doing it, and I tell people, and I tend to be a little bit direct with this, is that, you know, if you're doing it at 24, you have a good shot. If you're doing it at 44, you're basically considered a senior in the French workforce. Like you're considered old in the French workforce at 45. And I don't mean that in any kind of pejorative way, but there's a lot of unemployment that happens starting at around 50. I will say everyone is affected by it, but it also particularly affects women. There is an epidemic of women who lose their jobs in their early 50s who are pushed out. There's high unemployment at that age. It takes an incredibly long time for people at that age to find another job. The retirement age is theoretically 67 or 64 for some people, 64 for most people who are in their 50s. But it's not like there's a huge gap between when retirement age is and when people are actually able to find another job if they lose the job that they have. And so it's really a bad idea to go and study French with the expectation of you're going to be able to then get a job and get sponsored and work for a few years and apply for naturalization. So I really feel like people need to be aware of those issues. And again, it's not impossible. I won't say that, nobody over 45 or nobody over 52 or whatever gets hired and sponsored because it certainly is possible and does happen. But you do need to be aware that studying French while you're retired is not it's not a path that's going to lead you to citizenship. Lauren, what happens if you don't make the minimum amount needed for one or more of the 4 years that you have the visa or the carte de séjour for and are trying to renew it? So they want to see when they're looking at multiple years or they're looking at your first year or two of business, they want to see an upward trajectory. They want to see if you have like, okay, a busy season and a less busy season. They want to see that, what the average is, that the income is increasing. They're looking at trends. So, having a low first year is not necessarily going to impede you from getting residency or renewing your carte de séjour after 4 years. But if you have a low first year and then you make even less in year 4, that's going to be a major problem. Louis, my daughter is due to have a baby. How flexible is the visa and how many days do we have to stay in France and the longest period requirements to stay? So I want to be abundantly clear that if you have a visa or a carte de séjour to live in France, you need to actually live in France. And I think a lot of people have been taking that requirement loosely, but you need to be spending the majority of your time in France. The law is that you're spending at least 6 months of the year in France. That's what's actually in the law code. Realistically, and that's the same thing for the healthcare system, a minimum of 6 months in France to be able to benefit from the healthcare system. But there's a lot to do in the first year. If you are not spending at least 6 months in France during your first year in France, you're going to have a major problem getting all of the admin done. You're going to miss important letters. You absolutely would need to have somebody check your mail, and you need to be really on it because there's a lot to do. Okay, one final question in here, and then I'll take a brief look through the chat before I sign off. I did get through 10 pages of questions, so February and March all got answered today. Yumi, what is the time limit for moving to France after obtaining a visa? We're concerned about timing. Once we get the visa, is there a limit to how long we take to actually move? We're selling our house in the US and would like the assurance of having the visa available before actually selling. Okay, so you can apply for the visa. You can submit the visa application form up to 90 days before your actual intended departure date. That means that I could submit an application on March 13th for a move on April, May, June 10th, let's say. And when, you can have your appointment, get your passport back. Normally, you'll get your passport back in about a week, and they will put the start date that you indicate. So you want on your visa form, you want the start date of your visa, the start date of your housing reservation, the start date of your temporary insurance policy to all line up to the same date that you were telling them that you want your visa to start. So you can do that 90 days in advance and get your visa before the 90 days. And as we discussed before, if you end up moving like a week or two later, it's not a big deal, but you do need to arrive pretty quickly because there is a ton of admin that needs to be done to set up. And if you wait too long, you're going to be jeopardizing all of that arrival admin that needs to get done pretty quickly. Can you apply for your visa 3 months early and then do all of the house selling stuff afterwards? Yes, but it's going to be a tight timeline. I will also say that I don't normally recommend applying for the visa that early. Like, you don't need to leave that much time. Most people get their visa back within 7 days. I usually recommend leaving a month because I'm the person who gets to the airport 5 hours early. So that's just my perspective. Okay, so Suzanne, can you recommend a good resource for investing in a rental or Airbnb property in France? I would say you want to talk to a buyer's agent, and you especially want to make sure that you're looking to purchase in a place where Airbnb is still allowed because it's starting to be highly regulated pretty much everywhere. Can that be the basis for a business plan for the Profession Libérale visa application? So it depends on the type of rental. There's a lot of different categories of rentals and rental income in France. What you would be looking at doing is you would want to have professional rental income, so over 23,000 euros per year. Typically, that's going to mean more than one gîte, and that's an actual business. And you may be providing like additional services or have additional income streams tied onto the gîte. You would need to actually own the property before you get the DREET's approval and submit the business plan. Jenny, do all Profession Libérale visas out of country have to apply through DREETS prior to the visa application? Yes, as of the end of the year, you now need to have approval from DREETS that your business plan is real, serious, and viable before you can apply for a Profession Libérale visa. Now, note that it's a different process from Passeport Talent Création d'entreprise. That's a totally different procedure. I saw on a thread on Reddit the other day that somebody had done the DREETS procedure, but they were applying for Passeport Talent, so they got rejected, which is normal because they did the wrong, that wasn't their only mistake, but they did the wrong thing. And then DREETS is not required for Passeport Talent Profession Artistique. Finally, how long can you stay with just a passport? 90 out of 180 days. So you cannot stay more than any 90 days within any 180-day period. And without further ado, so that brings us to the end of our questions. Thank you for staying on so late and getting through all of these with me. I'm going to give you another link to schedule a consultation if you do have more questions, if you want to talk about your situation in depth. This is meant to be like sort of a general overview of the issues. It's a really good tool for people who might be a little while out from their move, who want to get to know us a little bit before having an individual conversation. But you do typically need personalized guidance and, discussion of a plan and a timeline and all of the admin that you will need to do after you arrive. So I highly encourage you to schedule an individual consultation where we can go through all of that together. The link is in the chat. The next Q&A is going to be on Monday, April 13th. So again, the second Monday of the month, Monday, April 6th, is Easter Monday, which is a holiday in France. So the Transformation office will be closed. So Q&A on Monday, April 13th. Again, 7 p.m. France time, which we will be back to 6 hours of time difference with the East Coast. So that will be 6 p.m. British time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. Pacific time. What else can I tell you? I think that's it. We will have this recording posted on YouTube within the next couple of days. Other than that, please do reach out for a consultation. We can also put together a proposal for you if you're considering working with us on your relocation. We have comprehensive relocation packages on everything from helping you to prepare the visa application all the way through getting you on the healthcare system, setting up your business, exchanging your license, all of the things that you need to do. And again, our goal is to help you create a successful and sustainable life in France by making sure you get all of the right admin done, especially during that first year, which is so important to making sure that you're set up for the long term and for being able to stay and renew and get a 10-year resident card and pass your civics test and all of the stuff that you're going to have to do if you plan on staying in France long term. So thank you again. I look forward to hopefully speaking with some of you individually over the next couple of weeks and to seeing you again on the Q&A on April 13th. Have a great rest of your day or all of your day for some of you, and I will see you later. Take care. Bye.